We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 76a. And the previous summer there was a machlokas amoraim between Rav and Shmuel. How is a person kona a svina, a ship? Rav said a meshicha kolshu, just pulling it a little bit is going to create the kinyan. And Shmuel said you have to do a meshicha, but the meshicha has to be where you pull it the full length of the ship. And the Gemara now is bringing a brisa from the Tosefta and trying to suggest that this machlokas Rav and Shmuel is actually a machlokas tanoim. The brisa here concludes uvishtar. This is talking about osios. It's a machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Nosson. And Rabbi Nosson says another way that a person can acquire a shtar, let's say somebody wants to sell his shtar to somebody else, that this other person should be able to collect the debt, so he can write up a shtar for the shtar, and that can allow the buyer to acquire the shtar. And the Rashbam explains of a shtar mechira al shtaros alalu. A person writes a document of sale on these particular documents that he wants to sell. Kedamar lekamon, as we'll say later on. And in any case, the Gemara continues, Osios mandakar shemayu. The Gemara says that if you look at the brisa we brought in the previous summit, it suddenly brings in this idea of osios. Osios again means letters. Literally, it's referring to the documents that the person is trying to buy, but they're never mentioned, meaning to say they're never mentioned by the Tanakama. All of a sudden, Rabbi Nosson mentions them, but they weren't mentioned by the Tanakama. And so the Gemara now revises the brisa and says, Chisure mechsra v'hachi katani. There must be words missing from the brisa, and it should read as follows. Svina niknes b'meshicha. A svina, a ship, is acquired with meshicha. V'osios b'mesira, and letters, meaning documents, are acquired through mesira. Again, mesira is when something is given over from the seller to the buyer. And Rabbi Nosson says, svina v'osios, when it comes to a ship and when it comes to letters, when it comes to documents, niknos b'meshicha uvishtar, they are acquired with meshicha, and they're also acquired with shtar, with a document as well. And the Gemara says even this revision doesn't really help, because shtar l'svina lamali, when you have a shtar, how is a shtar going to be effective for acquiring a svina, for acquiring a ship? It doesn't make sense. In other words, in the amended brisa we have here, Rabbi Nosson is saying both a svina and osios are acquired with meshicha and with a shtar. However, it's not going to work. A shtar is not going to be effective when it comes to something that's metaltalin. Metaltalihi, the svina is a movable object. A movable object cannot be acquired with a shtar, and so this revision cannot be correct. And so the Gemara revises again and says, Elalav hachi katani. Rather, is it not that the brisa should read as follows? Svina niknes b'meshicha. A ship is acquired with meshicha. V'osios b'mesira. And if you have letters, you have documents, that's acquired through mesira, through giving it over. Rabbi Nosson says, Svina b'meshicha. Svina is acquired with meshicha, again by pulling it. V'osios b'shtar. When it comes to letters, it requires a shtar. And the Rashbam explains that Rabbi Nosson means to say not only do you need mesira, but you need a shtar as well. You need a document as well. And the Rashbam explains, V'osios b'shtar, letters, documents are acquired with a shtar. Kilomar means to say af b'shtar, meaning you also need a shtar. The tarvayu boy, you need to have both. You need to have mesira ushtar. You need to have both mesira, giving over the document, and a shtar, writing up a document of sale on the document. Kirabonan da'amri l'kamon. This follows the opinion of the Rabbanan that we'll say later on. Lo konat sheyichtov v'yimser. You have to write it up and you have to give it over. De'i b'shtar l'chud kamer. Now, if Rabbi Nosson just meant a shtar alone works for osios, the osios niknos, that's how one can acquire osios. Imkain Rabbi Nosson damer kaman. If that were the case, Rabbi Nosson wouldn't be following any of the Tanaim we'll bring later on. Lo karevi v'lo karabbanan. He's not going to follow Rebbe or the Rabbanan. V'imkain ika shalosh machlukos b'davar. If so, there would be a three-way machlokas. And the Gemara continues, Svina b'meshicha, but it says over here that a svina is acquired with meshicha. That's what Rabbi Nosson says. But Hainu Tanakama, according to this revised understanding of the brisa, it's exactly the same as the Tanakama. The Tanakama says svina niknas b'meshicha, and then Rabbi Nosson says svina b'meshicha. So what's going on in the brisa? And so the Gemara suggests, Ela de Rav Shmuel ika beinayu. It must be that they're actually arguing in the same machlokas. And Rav and Shmuel, the question is, everybody agrees meshicha works for a svina. The question is, how much does the svina have to be pulled? And the Rashbam explains, Svina b'meshicha, lama le Rabbi Nosson l'meimar. Why does Rabbi Nosson have to mention Svina b'meshicha? Hainu Tanakama, isn't that identical to the Tanakama? Elala b'de Rav u'Shmuel kamiflagi. Aren't they arguing about the same machlokas, Rav and Shmuel? To kamar Tanakama, Svina niknas b'meshicha kula. Keshmuel, the Tanakama is saying it's niknas b'meshicha, meaning the entire thing. You have to pull it the whole length of the ship, like Shmuel says. V'yas Rabbi Nosson dehu Tana Basra l'tafuye. And Rabbi Nosson is coming to add on. He's the later Tana and adding on. The afilu b'meshicha kolshu niknas karav. Even just a small amount of meshicha is enough. It's going to be acquired, like Rav says. And the Gemara continues, lo no, the kuli alma, could be that everybody agrees, ikarav, ikashmuel, it could be everybody agrees, either like Rav, that Meshicha Kolshu works, or like Shmuel, that you have to pull the whole ship. Uvisvina kuli alma lo pligi, but the point is that by a ship, they're not arguing at all. The Tanakam and Rabbi Nosson are not arguing about a ship. Ki pligi ba'osios, the entire machlokas is only by osios, it's only by the acquisition of documents. V'hachi kamer le Rabbi Nosson l'Tanakam, and according to this understanding, here's what Rabbi Nosson is saying to the Tanakama, Bisvina v'adai modina lach, when it comes to a ship, I certainly admit to you, I agree that Meshicha works. Biosios, but when it comes to letters, if you have a document that works, in other words, the Mesira alone does not work, you need a document as well, ilolo, but if you do not have a document, it will not be acquired. And the Gemara continues, according to this understanding, the machlokas over here about how one acquires osios is the same exact machlokas in the following brisa, the machlokas tanoim, the Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, osios niknos b'mesira divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says that osios are acquired through Mesira, again through giving it over. The Chachamim say, Bein Kasav v'lo Masar, if he wrote it up but didn't do the Mesira, Bein Masar v'lo Kasav, or let's say he gave it over but didn't write it up, Lo Kana, that's not going to be a kinyan, Ad sheyichtov v'yimser, unless you write it up in a document and also give it over. And so you see the Chachamim are following Rabbi Nosson that both are required. You need to have Mesira and you need to have a shtar as well. But the Gemara continues, B'mayu kimta karevi, but how could you say the Tanakam of this brisa is following Rebbe, meaning the Tanakam is saying that osios are niknos b'mesira? That's what Rebbe says, Mesira alone is sufficient. But if you're going to say the Tanakam is following Rebbe, so Sfina nami tikni b'mesira, so then a ship, you shouldn't need Meshicha, Mesira should be effective. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Sfina niknos b'mesira divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says that a ship is acquired through Mesira, through giving it over. The Chachamim omer, and the Chachamim say, Lokan, it's not going to be acquired, as we'll see on the next it's not acquired until there's a Meshicha. And the Rashbam explains, B'mayu kimta l'Tanakama de Rabbi Nosson karebi, how can you say that the Tanakama of the Brisa with Rabbi Nosson, how can you say that follows Rebbe? If that were the case, Svina nami tekni b'Mesira, so the ship also should be acquired through Mesira. Again, let's say you have a rope that's given over from the seller to the buyer, that should be sufficient. V'amai boy Meshicha, why do you need Meshicha? Why does the buyer need to pull it? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis.